With me here in studio to share their reporting and their insights, CNN's Dana Bash, Michael Scher with the New York Times, CNN legal analyst Shan Wu, and Paul Begala, a longtime Democratic strategist who, of course, was a senior advisor to Bill Clinton back during his impeachment. Shan, I just want to start with you when you look at the list. I want the legal take on it because there's been a political conversation. A lot of people telling the president, you want combat, you want Jim Jordan, you want Mark Meadows, you want John Radcliffe, some of the House members who have been his strongest defenders. This is a decision by the president that, no, I need good legal people, not good political people?
I think that's right. I think it's generally a good decision because Starr and Dershowitz can probably supply some legal cover for the Republican senators. They can supply information about their interpretation of the Constitution, what the framers wanted. That's what they would need to stick on. If Starr kind of veers into his love of publicity, goes off the rails a little bit, he's going to be very ineffective. Starr's never been a trial lawyer, but they can use them for the kind of substantive constitutional take on things.
The first big case I ever covered was the Klaus von Bülow appeal back in the day in Rhode Island. Alan Dershowitz was his appellate lawyer back then. That's not a job where you do courtroom argument. It's not where you're trying to sway a jury. You're trying to sway a judge. So it's a little interesting, the choices, but there's no question about the intellect. I do want to get to the politics, though. I lived through this with you. I was covering the White House in those days. You were in a different capacity advising the president on how to handle this. Monica Lewinsky tweeted this a short time ago. This is definitely an are you, fill in the blank, kidding me kind of day. I'm guessing you having the same feelings.
Yeah, people, first off, should go back, people who are younger than old guys like us, and look at how Starr and his...
We were child prodigies, Paul.
Yes, we were. Starr and his team abused Ms. Lewinsky. It's really, really shocking if you look at the way they treated her, threatening her family with criminal charges. It's absolutely outrageous. And so people should know that. People should know that during the Clinton impeachment, Sam Dash, legendary Watergate lawyer, was Starr's ethics advisor. Dash resigned. He resigned in protest because he believed Starr was so unethical. In fact, he said what he did was unlawful, not in terms of Monica Lewinsky. This is in terms of impeachment. So Starr brings some baggage. He's the guy who said we have to impeach the president for a consensual affair that he lied about. Now he's going to say that what the GAO calls a crime, soliciting a bribe from Ukraine to leveraging American military, that's no big deal. That's a tough case to make. He's a smart lawyer, but that's a tough one.
Since you brought up the criticism of Starr, I just want to bring in Mr. Wray. Most people I talked to back in those days thought he handled the shutdown of the investigation rather professionally. Is that your remember?
I left as soon as the impeachment trial was over, so I never dealt with Robert Ray, so I just don't know.
In the end,
he's going to have to make some...
In a settlement with the president at the end, the president had to give up his law license in the end. So Mr. Ray did not just walk away, but he did shut down the investigation where some in Clinton land thought it might keep going on endlessly there. So you look through the clips, right? What have these gentlemen said about the current case? So this is Ken Starr talking about the number one issue. Democrats want to push, the House impeachment managers want to push to get new witnesses, new documents not considered during the House impeachment debate. Ken Starr was asked about this on Fox News quite recently.
I predict there are going to be witnesses. We've had too many indications from too many different senators that they want this.
Who's a witness then? Who appears?
I think the top one is John Bolton, right, for the Democrats. And then the Republicans really do want Hunter Biden.
And you think that will happen? That's what you're saying now?
Oh, there will be a battle royal over Hunter Biden.
He will now be central to the battle royal over all of these witnesses. But it is interesting in the sense that if the president or Mr. Cipollone at least did their due diligence, they know this is now they know this is in the record. And when this argument plays out on the Senate floor, it's not binding to the senators. They can vote any way they want. The Chief Justice can rule any way he wants. But it's easy to stand up and say, well, Mr. Starr, you're here representing the president. You said just a while ago, probably a good idea to have witnesses.
A lot of things are in the record. And to be fair, for people in both parties who are still around, where you can use what they're saying, look at what they're saying then and say, very hypocritical based on what they're saying now. But can we just say once again, you guys had the talk about the Clinton years. This is not an accident that this president chose these lawyers for a couple reasons. One is he likes people who play lawyers on TV, who are actually lawyers, because that's how he consumes information, a lot of information. He also happens to know Alan Dershowitz very well, but also he is obsessed with the Clintons, and he has been, Hillary Clinton and so forth. And so to be able to get all of these players who were involved on the other side during the Clinton years, it is very telling of who Trump is and how Trump thinks. Never mind that I'm going to have to go back into the, into my storage and find my grunge, my grunge wear, my flannels, and I'm going to pop Nirvana to the top of my playlist.
Does it matter? Dan is right. We are in the here and now, and the person who was impeached is the President of the United States, who says blue on Monday and red on Tuesday and says there's no difference in what he said Monday and Tuesday. So things change as we go. But I just want you to listen, to go back in time. For those of you unfamiliar, here's Ken Starr, and then his successor is the Whitewater Independent Counsel, Robert Ray, talking about different issues here. But I want you to see them and hear them, to refamiliarize yourself with them, then we'll talk.
I have to exercise responsibly my authority only to bring a case where I believe that a fair-minded jury would convict on that evidence beyond a reasonable doubt.
He engaged in an apparent scheme to conceal gifts that had been subpoenaed from Ms. Lewinsky. He coached a potential witness, his own secretary, Mrs. Curry, with a false account of relevant events. Those acts constitute a pattern of obstruction that is fundamentally inconsistent with the President's duty to faithfully execute the law.
It's a flashback, but there are two very interesting points there. When Ray shut it down, a lot of Republicans were very critical of him, saying, why aren't you bringing additional charges? Why aren't you going after Whitewater? Why aren't you going after other things? And he was saying, that's not my job. My job is only a case I can bring to a jury. I don't see it. He shut it down. In Starr's case there, though, in that testimony, and if you go back through the whole Starr report, his fights with the courts, he repeatedly said the President of the United States has an obligation, when under investigation by a constitutionally appropriate authority, as he was in that case, to turn things over, and that Bill Clinton kept stalling and obstructing. Bill Clinton did stall. Bill Clinton did stall. Not my job to use the word obstruct. Nowhere near the level of no that has come from the Trump administration. How does he square that circle?
Well, and the Democrats will no doubt point to that as a way of when we get to that debate ultimately about whether to call witnesses, whether whether the Senate should demand more documents. They'll turn to that. Look, I think one of the other interesting points here is that we have still never seen what the president's legal defense of all of this is. We have seen his political defense, right? We have seen letters from Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, which are largely political arguments, and we've seen the House members, the Jim Jordans of the world, making largely political responses. We've never yet seen an actual legal defense. And so the challenge for these lawyers is going to be to take their client, who really wants a political defense put on, he wants to be exonerated in a political sense, and they're going to have to turn that into some kind of a legal argument that satisfies their client.
Yeah,
To that
I want to
point,
spend
to
our
that point
team
before
on
you jump.
stalling here. Not stall, Mr. King.
I
just wanted to hit you with some
The then
facts. Tell me
President of the
when it's
United
my
States
turn.
back then lied to the American people for 7
You
months.
said stall.
And then
he lied about an affair, John. Everybody who has an
I'm
affair
not-
lies.
he-
Nobody
he
comes
stalled-
home and
he
says, honey, I
stalled-
had the greatest
he
affair
stalled-
last night.
He stalled in some of the requests for documents. They pushed. They challenged things in courts.
Can I give you some facts? We produced 90,000 documents.
That's why I said.
Trump has produced zero.
That's why I said in the end, they agreed to comply with subpoenas, and nothing like on the scale we have seen here. I agree with that.
90,000 documents, dozens of witnesses. The president himself testified under oath for over 4 hours. These creeps asking him about his sex life under oath. He testified. He gave blood. Trump won't do anything. You can't compare the two. If what Clinton did is stalling, then it's really clear that what Trump is doing is obstructing justice.
That's for the senators to decide. I'm going to run a little long here on purpose because I do want people to hear the voices here to the point that was just being made. We have heard Pam Bondi on television. You're going to hear her, and you're going to hear Alan Dershowitz on television. But to the idea that it's okay to ask the Ukrainian president to investigate Joe Biden and to withhold the White House meeting and to withhold the White House, say, no, that's not what they talk about. They say Nancy Pelosi's in the wrong.
She calls our great president, who did nothing wrong, a clear and present danger. Oh, he's so horrible that she had to get things over there. And what does she do? She holds on to him. It's political gamesmanship, and she failed miserably. We're pleased they're coming over.
Hamilton would be appalled at this notion that you can impeach and not bring it to the Senate. First of all, Nancy Pelosi has no power to keep it from the Senate. The leaders of the Senate have the right to just say, we're scheduling the trial. She is placing herself above the law, Nancy Pelosi.
To Michael's point, we have yet to hear a factual defense of a documentary evidence from all of the witnesses in this case that is pretty damning, that the president did not give the new president of Ukraine a White House meeting, would not give him one, still hasn't given him one, and withheld aid until he got what he wanted, which was a personal political gift that has nothing to do with national security.
There is no factual defense possible.
Then what do they do?
They have to take a look at those facts and try to devise a legal theory to say this was still within the scope either of his duties as a president or this isn't what the founding fathers intended. The one thing I would point out is looking to Ken Starr to rein in the idea of irrelevance in terms of witnesses. I would not hold my breath on that. That's the guy who went from a real estate inquiry into a sex scandal.
Mr. Begala should buy you lunch for that. That's a fact. Up next for us, how will Democrats answer this question? Do you really want Lev Parnas to testify at the trial?